The wind howled through the desolate snow-covered landscape, its icy fingers reaching for everything in its path. The cold was unbearable, and yet, a lone figure trudged through the deep snow, struggling with every step. A human, exhausted and worn, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Their clothes were tattered, their face pale, but determination flickered in their eyes. They had been walking for what felt like days, searching for shelter, hoping to find a sign of life in the barren wasteland. The ground beneath their feet seemed to tremble slightly. They paused, listening. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, a low rumble echoed through the air, a deep sound that seemed to come from the very earth itself. The human's heart skipped a beat. They spun around, their eyes wide, searching for the source of the sound. The snowstorm had started to pick up, but in the distance, something was different. A figure emerged from the blizzard. Massive and imposing, the human squinted, unsure if their mind was playing tricks on them. But no, it was real. A towering creature, its body covered in thick white fur, stepped into view. The beast's glowing blue eyes pierced through the storm, its powerful form almost glowing against the white landscape. The creature was like nothing the human had ever seen. It was a beast of legend, with great horns curling from its head and a body large enough to dwarf the human. Atop the creature sat a figure equally as striking, a woman, but not entirely human. Her skin was a pale green, and her eyes gleamed with an otherworldly light. Her armor, intricately designed with sharp edges and glowing accents, shimmered against the snow. She sat tall and regal, her posture commanding as she gazed down at the human below her. The human's heart raced as the beast slowly advanced, its footsteps leaving deep marks in the snow. The beast's eyes locked onto the human, and a low growl vibrated through the air. The alien queen, without moving, raised her hand, signaling the beast to stop. The human froze in place, unsure what to do. The queen's eyes were unblinking, and her presence felt as though it had completely dominated the frozen world around them. The storm seemed to die down just enough for the human to hear the soft click of metal. As the queen dismounted, her boots made no sound as they touched the ground, her movements graceful, yet terrifyingly precise. She stood before the human, towering over them. The creature at her side, still looming, growled softly, a warning to anyone who might dare defy its master. The human, paralyzed by fear and awe, tried to speak but could barely find their voice. What was this creature? Who was this woman? And why had she appeared before them? They tried to gather their thoughts, but everything seemed to blur in the presence of the alien queen. The air around them felt charged, thick with the unknown. The queen's voice cut through the silence, low and steady, but filled with authority. "I am the ruler of this land," she said, her words echoing in the cold air. "And you, human, are trespassing on my domain." The human's mind raced as they tried to comprehend the situation. They had stumbled into the wrong place at the wrong time, but they couldn't move. The queen's presence was overwhelming that she took a step closer, and the beast moved in sync with her. The human now saw the full scale of the beast's power, its massive claws digging into the snow, its muscles rippling under the thick fur. It was a creature that could tear through anything in its path, and yet it obeyed the queen with absolute loyalty. "Do you understand?" The queen's voice was even colder now. The human nodded, the words barely forming on their lips. The presence of the alien queen left no room for anything but obedience. It was clear that she was not just a ruler, she was a force of nature. The snow continued to fall around them, the wind beginning to howl once more. But the queen and her beast remained still, as though the entire world bent to their will. The human couldn't escape. There was nowhere to run. The human's heart pounded in their chest, every breath shallow as they stood frozen before the alien queen. The vast, snowy landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, and yet it felt like the world had shrunk down to just them, the queen and the beast. Time seemed to slow, and for a brief moment, the human thought they might wake up from this nightmare. But the icy wind biting at their skin reminded them this was no dream, it was real, and the queen's gaze was locked onto them like a predator sizing up its prey. The creature beside her, a beast like nothing the human had ever seen, stood towering and silent. Its eyes were glowing blue, a stark contrast against the white snow. and its fur shimmered with an ethereal glow. The beast growled softly, a deep, rumbling sound that vibrated through the ground. The human instinctively took a step back, but the queen's eyes never left them. She watched with an unsettling calmness, as if waiting for something to unfold. The silence stretched on, suffocating. The human's throat went dry, and they fought the urge to collapse in fear. They had no idea who this queen was or what she wanted, but the unease gnawing at their insides told them this was not a simple encounter. No, this was something far more dangerous, something that could change everything. The queen stepped forward, her armor gleaming in the soft light of the snowstorm. Each movement was deliberate, calculated, like a predator closing in on its prey. As she moved, the beast's massive paws sank into the snow, its muscles rippling beneath the thick fur. The human stood rigid, unsure of what to do. Should they speak? Should they beg? Every instinct told them to run, to get as far away as possible. But the weight of the queen's presence held them in place. Her authority was undeniable, and the beast at her side only emphasized the danger. The human's breath hitched when the queen came to a stop just a few feet away. Her cold eyes locked onto theirs, piercing deep into their soul. "You're far from home, human," she said, her voice low and unyielding. The words felt like ice sliding into the human's veins. "You've entered my domain without permission. Do you understand the consequences of your actions?" The humans swallowed hard, trying to form words, but their voice caught in their throat. How could they explain? How could they tell this powerful being they were lost? That they had no idea where they were or how they ended up here? The words wouldn't come. The queen's gaze intensified, and she seemed to sense the human's fear. Her lips curling slightly into a smirk. "Pathetic," she muttered, her voice carrying an edge of disdain. But instead of striking, she stepped aside, raising a hand to signal the beast. The creature snarled, its eyes narrowing, but it didn't move. The human's knees began to shake, but they held their ground, terrified of what would happen next. The queen's eyes softened, just for a moment. "You will learn," she said, her tone shifting ever so slightly, "that survival here is not given. It must be earned." She paused, her gaze flickering to the beast. "And if you refuse to understand, the consequences will be swift." A chill ran down the human's spine, and their mind raced, scrambling for a way out. But as the queen turned to look at the creature beside her, the human knew there was no escape. In the cold, empty expanse of this alien world, their fate rested entirely in the hands of the queen and her monstrous beast, and the only choice they had now was how they would face it. The humans' thoughts spun wildly, but they couldn't escape the cold reality of the situation. The queen's presence was suffocating, her power undeniable. Her eyes, like cold, calculating stars, pierced through them as though she was already reading every thought, every fear, every possible outcome of this encounter. The beast beside her, still and silent, seemed to hum with raw energy, its glowing eyes flickering with an almost sadistic pleasure. It was waiting, watching, as if savoring the tension in the air. The queen raised her hand once more, and the beast shifted. A low growl rumbled from deep within its chest, sending vibrations through the ground. The human flinched, but there was nowhere to hide. The snowstorm howled around them, but the queen and her beast were a frozen island in the midst of it all. "I do not tolerate trespassers," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. Each word was sharp, like ice carving through the human's resolve. The human tried to speak, but their throat was tight. What could they say? Could they beg for mercy? Could they plead for their life? Every option seemed hopeless in the face of such power. As if sensing the human's internal struggle, the queen stepped closer, her boots crunching on the snow with each step. The sharp, metallic scent of her armor mixed with the sharpness of the frozen air. The beast remained motionless, but its eyes never left the human. Its jaw opened slightly, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth that gleamed with a dangerous promise. The human's chest tightened. They had seen fear before, but never like this. Not like this. The queen's figure loomed before them. Her eyes locked onto theirs with an intensity that made them feel, as though they were being pierced to the core. There was no hiding from her gaze, no evading the truth that lay in her words. The human had made a mistake, a grave mistake, and now there was no turning back. "Do you understand what it means to trespass here?" The queen's voice, though soft, carried an unmistakable threat. Her fingers slowly curled into a fist, and the human felt the air grow colder, as though it was being sucked out of the world around them. The ground beneath them shifted ever so slightly, as though the very planet itself was reacting to her power. The human's mind raced, but it was as though they were drowning in a sea of uncertainty. What did she want from them? What was this place? Why had they been brought here, to this alien world, to face this alien queen? The cold was biting, and the presence of the beast only intensified the feeling of imminent danger. The human's mind screamed for answers, but the only sound that met their ears was the whistling wind and the growls of the beast. They couldn't escape, couldn't run. This was their reality now, one of fear, submission, and the cold embrace of an unknown fate. The queen stepped closer again, and this time, the beast moved with her. It circled the human, its massive form blocking out the light, its heavy breathing echoing in the stillness. The queen was watching, studying, waiting for the human to make their next move. The tension was unbearable. There was no going back. The human would have to face the wrath of the queen or submit. The weight of the decision was crushing, and yet, in that moment, it seemed that only one thing mattered: surviving this alien world. The human stood motionless, their mind racing, their heart pounding in their chest. The queen's eyes, like cold fire, never left them, as if searching for any sign of weakness, any crack in their resolve. The beast circled, its glowing eyes locked on the human, a silent predator that seemed to draw closer with each passing second. The snow beneath them felt like a distant memory, the cold biting at their skin, now an afterthought compared to the looming terror before them. The human's breath was shallow, each exhale visible in the freezing air. Every instinct screamed for them to run, to flee from this alien world, from this towering queen, from the monster that stood beside her. But no matter how much they wanted to, no matter how loudly their bodies screamed to move, they couldn't. The weight of the queen's gaze held them in place. The very air around them seemed to shift, charged with an unnatural energy. It was as if the queen herself controlled the world, the storm, the beast, and even time itself. The queen took another step forward, the sound of her armor whispering with each movement, the icy wind biting at the edges of her figure. She was so close now that the human could see the cold glint in her eyes, the sharpness of her features, and the cold beauty of her alien armor. There was no denying her power, her absolute command over everything in sight. The beast, still looming, now stood at attention beside her, waiting for her next command, its massive form seeming to fill the world around them. "Tell me why you're here." The queen's voice cut through the silence like a blade. It wasn't a question, it was an order. The human's throat tightened, and for a moment, they couldn't speak. What could they say? Could they explain they were lost? Could they tell her they meant no harm? But the words caught in their throat. How could they explain themselves to someone so far beyond their understanding? Someone who ruled over such a brutal, cold world. I didn't mean to intrude," the human finally stammered, their voice barely a whisper against the howling wind. "I got lost. I was just looking for shelter. I didn't know who you were." The queen's lips curled slightly, but there was no warmth in her smile. She was unamused, as though the human's words were meaningless. The beast let out a soft growl, its eyes narrowing, and the human instinctively took a step back, almost tripping over the snow beneath them. The queen raised a hand, signaling the beast to stand down, though it didn't ease the tension. "You are far from home," the queen said, her voice still cold and calculating. "This is not a place for your kind to wander. You've trespassed on my world, human, and such actions have consequences." The human's knees trembled, the weight of her words sinking in like stones in their chest. Every moment in her presence felt like 1,000, each second stretching longer than the last. The humans swallowed hard, their mouth dry, but they stood tall, unwilling to break. If they were going to face this queen, they would face her with whatever courage they had left. The queen's expression shifted, and she regarded them for a long, silent moment. The beast shifted too, its eyes now watching the human as if it could read their very soul. The wind howled louder, but within the queen's presence, it felt as if the storm itself was waiting for her next words. "Your fate is in my hands now," the queen said softly, her voice dropping to an almost gentle tone. though there was nothing gentle about it. You may kneel, or you may face the consequences. The choice is yours, the words echoed in the cold air, and the human felt the crushing weight of the decision. Would they bow, or would they stand defiant? The world seemed to hold its breath, the silence deafening, as the fate of the human hung in the balance. The human stood there, frozen, their heart racing as the Queen's chilling words echoed in the air. The choice is yours, she had said, but it didn't feel like a choice at all. Her voice was like the cold wind itself, unyielding, unforgiving. The beast beside her shifted, its massive body rippling with restrained power, and its glowing eyes seemed to penetrate the human's very soul. Every breath the human took felt like it was being suffocated by the weight of the Queen's presence. For a brief moment, the human's mind spun, trying to make sense of everything. Was this some twisted game, or was it something far darker? They had never believed in aliens, never imagined meeting one, let alone an alien queen with the power to control beasts and worlds. The reality of their situation hit harder than the cold ever could. This wasn't just about survival. This was about power, dominance, and fate itself. The humans' legs trembled, but they kept themselves upright. To kneel before this queen would be to accept defeat, to acknowledge their insignificance in the face of such power. But to refuse her, the consequences of defiance were clear, written in the cold, calculating gaze of the Queen and the deadly promise in the beast's growl. The human felt the crushing weight of their decision, their fate hanging by a thread. The Queen's eyes never left them, watching, waiting, as though she had all the time in the universe. She was a creature of patience, one who had ruled for centuries, maybe more. The beast let out a soft growl, its large form closing in, circling slowly, almost as if it were testing the human's resolve. The human could feel its hot breath on their face, smell the faint musk of its fur, hear the deep, rhythmic beat of its heart. It was a reminder that this was no ordinary creature. This was a force of nature, and it answered only to the Queen. The human's mind reeled. They had faced danger before, but nothing like this. In the past, they had fought back, scraped by with sheer will and luck. But here, in this alien world, they were outmatched, outclassed, and powerless. Every part of them screamed to kneel, to show the Queen the respect she demanded. But something deep inside them resisted. There was a flicker of defiance, a desire to prove they weren't just another helpless victim of fate. "I won't kneel," the human said, their voice shaky but determined. It was a whisper, barely more than a breath against the howling wind. But it was enough to catch the Queen's attention. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The beast paused, its eyes narrowing. The Queen didn't move, her expression unreadable. The human stood their ground. Despite the fear gnawing at them, it was one thing to face fear. It was another to stand against something this powerful. The Queen had already proven she could crush them with a wave of her hand, yet they stood firm. The cold seeping into their bones, but their will as stubborn as ever. The tension in the air thickened, a charged silence wrapping around them like a shroud. The Queen's lips curled into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Very well," she said, her voice low and almost musical. The words sent a chill through the human's spine. They had made their stand, but what would come next? What punishment would the Queen deal out for this defiance? The human could only wait, the weight of their choice settling on them like a stone in their chest. The beast, sensing the shift in the air, moved forward once more, and the human's heart skipped a beat. The human's chest tightened as the beast advanced, its massive form casting a long shadow over them. The ground seemed to tremble beneath its feet, each step a reminder of the overwhelming power it held. The Queen stood silently, observing, her eyes never leaving the human, her expression unreadable. The tension in the air was thick, more oppressive than the freezing cold, more suffocating than the howling winds that surrounded them. For a moment, it seemed as though time had stopped. The beast's glowing eyes flickered, its massive jaws parted, revealing rows of sharp teeth that gleamed ominously in the dim light. The human's breath came in ragged gasps, their pulse pounding in their ears. They had defied the Queen, and now they were face to face with the consequences. The beast's growl echoed in the human's mind like a drumbeat, and they instinctively took a step back, only to find themselves trapped by the snowy expanse behind them. There was nowhere to run. The queen's gaze shifted from the beast to the human, her eyes colder than the storm around them. She took a slow, deliberate step forward, her boots crunching on the snow with each movement. "You have chosen your path," she said, her voice smooth yet razor-sharp. "But do not mistake this for mercy. You are in my domain now, human. And in my domain, the strong survive, and the weak perish." The human's heart raced as the weight of her words sank in. This was no idle threat. The beast wasn't just a tool of intimidation, it was the queen's enforcer, her instrument of destruction. The human's throat went dry, but they refused to look away, refusing to show any more fear than they already had. If they were going to survive this, they had to find a way to stand their ground. The queen's lips parted in a faint, cruel smile, sensing the human's defiance. "Your survival is a test," she said, "one that you must prove yourself worthy of. I do not kill without reason. You will have a chance to show me what you are made of." The beast stopped in its tracks, its piercing eyes never leaving the human. The queen's hand rose, a subtle but commanding gesture. The beast obeyed instantly, lowering its head and growling softly, though its body remained taut, ready to spring at any moment. It was as if the queen had momentarily quelled the beast's hunger for violence, but only because she was watching. She was the one in control. "Prove your worth," she repeated, her voice now soft but carrying an undeniable weight. "You will face me in a contest of strength, of will. Show me that you are not just a frightened creature, and I will consider sparing your life." The human's mind raced, scrambling to understand what the queen was asking. A contest? With the queen herself? With the beast watching, waiting? It sounded impossible. Yet there was a strange fire growing within them, a spark of determination igniting in the deepest part of their soul. The odds were stacked against them. The queen had shown no mercy. But perhaps there was a way. Perhaps there was a sliver of hope, even in the face of such overwhelming power. "Prepare yourself," the queen said, her eyes narrowing as she sized up the human. "You will not leave here unchanged. Whatever happens next will determine if you live or die." The human felt the weight of her words settle like a heavy cloak, suffocating them with the reality of the situation. This was no longer just a matter of survival. It was a matter of proving that they were not just a mere human, not just prey, but something more, something worth sparing. The human stood motionless, every muscle tense, every instinct screaming to flee. Yet their feet remained rooted in the snow. The queen's words echoed in their mind, her challenge lingering like an unspoken promise. "Prove your worth," she had said. The icy wind whipped around them, but all the human could focus on was the queen and the beast. Time seemed to stretch, each second feeling like an eternity. They had no idea what to expect, but they knew that failure was not an option. Not anymore. The queen's eyes were locked onto them, her expression unreadable. She stood tall, poised, a figure of authority and power, her armor gleaming despite the harsh storm. Her presence filled the space between them, dominating everything in its vicinity. It was clear that this was not a simple test. This was her world, her rules, and the human was a mere pawn in her game. Yet, something deep within them began to rise, an unexplainable resolve, a quiet defiance that had been buried deep inside since the moment they arrived on this alien world. The beast, sensing the shift, shifted its weight, its massive paws sinking into the snow. Its eyes never wavered, its low growls vibrating through the stillness, as if awaiting the signal to spring into action. But the queen, with a single glance, commanded it to stay. The human didn't know what to expect. Was the queen going to unleash the beast upon them? Or was this truly a contest, a chance to prove their strength? The queen's voice, soft yet powerful, broke the silence. "You will face me now. Prove that you are worthy of your life." Her words were cold, detached, but there was an underlying note of something else, perhaps a touch of curiosity, or maybe even respect. She seemed intrigued, watching closely, waiting for the human to make their move. There was no room for hesitation now. The moment to act had come. The human could feel the heat of the queen's gaze on them, pushing them forward, urging them to do something, anything. They had no weapon, no skill that could match her supernatural strength, but they had one thing the queen didn't expect: the will to survive. With a sudden rush of adrenaline, the human took a step toward the queen. their legs unsteady but their resolve unwavering. Every fiber of their being screamed to run, but they didn't. They couldn't. Not now. The queen raised a brow, the faintest trace of amusement crossing her features. She stepped back, giving the human a bit of space, as if allowing them to make the first move. The beast, too, seemed to pause, its eyes flickering between the queen and the human, waiting for its signal. The human's heart raced, but they didn't flinch. They had no choice now but to face the queen head-on. With trembling hands, they clenched their fists, readying themselves for whatever would come next. The world seemed to fall away, leaving only the queen and the beast in front of them. This was no longer about fear. It was about proving that they were not just a helpless wanderer on an alien planet, that they were capable of standing tall, even in the face of overwhelming odds. With a swift motion, the queen lunged forward, faster than the human could anticipate. Her movements were fluid, precise, and it was clear that every step she took was calculated to deliver a blow. The human barely had time to react, but something deep within them clicked. They dodged, just barely avoiding the queen's strike, and in that moment, they knew this was their chance. The fight had begun,